This year, for the first time, members of Generation Z, those born after 1997, are expected to outnumber baby boomers in the workforce. They bring with them, like past generations, different expectations, attitudes towards upper management, and views on the importance of work in their daily lives. Stephanie Sy has more in a moment, but first, let's hear from workers in those different generations.
I'm Chris Hicks, a 29-year-old millennial engineer from Cleveland, Ohio.
My name is Ingrid Camphouse. I am Generation X. I am based in Springfield, Illinois. I work in state government and I am a learning and development manager.
My name is Gabriel Casul. I'm a retail sales associate and part of Gen Z.
My name is Lucinda Manley. I work in Florida in the insurance industry and have for over 40 years, and I am the boomer generation.
I would say for a good portion of my career, I did make work my identity. I am not proud of that. It would be to the point where I was working every evening, all the time on the weekends. There were many times where my partner would take the laptop out of my hands as we were in bed.
I've had to force myself to work within certain hours and then turn off my phone afterwards, right? Just so that way I can maintain some sort of peace for myself and protect my relationships and hobbies.
I was working for a company that we had high demand customers. My daughter at the time was going to take her driver's test. In the middle of all of this, I was doing a certificate of insurance. And I remember her telling me, "Mom, can you stop working? I'm learning to drive. I'm taking my test. Can you focus on me for a change?" That was sort of a epiphany for me to know that it was getting to be too much. You know, the strong work ethic was actually ruling not just my life, but the life of my family.
Gen Z is finally taking the stance on demanding what boundaries can be set, what rules should be followed. We're being asked to take on jobs of 3 to 4 different people, meet those expectations, and then exceed expectations, all while being paid the bare minimum. Quite frankly, me and my generation, we don't see that as a substantial way of living. People like to tout that they work 60, 70 hours a week, but we ask the question, what is that life? Is that really living?
For me, there's never really been a reward for all the hard work. Don't get me wrong, I have a great job, but it never really came with the rewards that I thought, especially monetary rewards.
Work supports my relationships. It supports my ability to go out and have lunch with my friends and visit family. So I work to live because those things are more important. This work is the foundation and it feeds all the things that I need or that I really prioritize.
What I wish I would have known starting my career is that my value as a person is not coupled to the work that I'm doing. Really what did it was onboarding the younger generation and really buying into the millennials, you know, where it's like, hey, 5 o'clock, I'm done, no weekends and all that. So I'm really taking a cue from that generation.
Older generations will constantly say that we are lazy, we don't want to work, we just want handouts, when in reality, we want things to be fair, we want things to be acceptable. When it comes to pay, for example, the cost of living has gone up and companies are making record profits, and we're just not seeing that down at the bottom.
For more, I'm joined by Kyla Scanlon, a writer and content creator that focuses on economics. Kyla, thanks so much for joining the NewsHour. You know, you heard from that last comment that we just played from Gabriel, the Gen Zer, a lot of the things that you talk about on social media, which is the idea that Gen Zers feel they can no longer achieve the American dream by working. Is that the reason why a lot of Gen Zers have simply decided to forego work?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gen Z has had a tough go of it, you know, being essentially born into the tech bubble, growing up during the Great Recession, and then graduating or being in college during the pandemic, it's all quite difficult. And I think the relationship between the employer and the employee has deteriorated significantly over the past 25 years or so. And so a lot of Gen Zers look at the traditional 9 to 5 structure and they're like, that doesn't necessarily offer me what it maybe offered my parents or grandparents. So they seek out flexible work arrangements. They seek out, maybe consulting or different types of freelancing work versus going after a more traditional corporate structure.
You talk a lot about housing affordability as being part of that American dream. There has been some data in the past year that shows younger workers within Gen Z have actually seen about an 8% rise in wage growth. That's more than the overall population. Why isn't wage growth enough to offset those financial burdens that seem so keenly felt by Gen Zers?
Yeah, I mean, I think housing definitely impacts pretty much everybody, not just Gen Z. But I think for a lot of Gen Zers, rent is definitely not as affordable as it used to be. Real wages have increased, so wages adjusted for inflation, but rent has increased much more. And that's sort of the foundation of how everyone experiences the economy is like where you live and how you have to pay for where you live. And so I think people look at the price of rent, they look at the price of gas, they look at the price of food, they just look at the inflation that we've experienced over the past few years, and it's sometimes just not enough to even make those real wage gains worth it.
It goes back to a term that I believe you coined, which is vibecession, the feeling that there's a vibe that we're in a recession, even though the economy is not in that place. You attribute that to housing. What are the vibes now, especially as we head into an election?
Yeah, so the vibecession is that disconnect between consumer sentiment and economic data. And a lot of it is structural affordability, like housing. It's also the cost of childcare, elder care, these things that are economically quite painful, but don't necessarily show up in traditional economic measurements, like GDP, et cetera. They're things that are kind of these hidden costs that people experience. There's also the media sentiment that drives a lot of how people feel about their economic circumstances. Media sentiment has trended negative for a long time, and that's just unfortunately the business model in a lot of cases. And so people are reading headlines that are quite negative, dealing with structural affordability problems, despite everyone being like, well, the economy is okay. And so there's a bit of a disconnect there. And I think especially for the younger generation, they get most of their news from social media, which definitely has a little bit of a clickbait phenomenon. And I think it really does drive how people experience economic circumstances. And then going into the election, that's also quite difficult because both candidates are trying to win. And so both candidates are saying things to win. And some of that can be confusing if you don't have a proper understanding of the economy.
That is Kyla Scanlon, who focuses on the economy on her social media channels. Kyla, thanks so much for joining us with your insights.
Thanks for having me.